Good morning to all of you, and good evening to all of you, wherever you may be. It has been a while since this Bodhicharyavatara class last met. I hope all of you are doing well. So we will now begin with the opening recitations that we have mostly done in the Tibetan. So of course, please, by this point, actually this is class 60. By this point, I hope if you have been participating in this class, whether in all 60 classes or a handful of them, hopefully you remember already the content of what we recite at the beginning. And we start with 4 recitations. And even though the words are all different, principally they are about bodhicitta. Making the aspiration, making the commitment to apply bodhicitta. So those are the first 2. Taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha to provide clear guidance and reference point for what we are doing, and even that motivated by a desire to benefit all beings in the most meaningful way, which is by ourselves becoming Buddhas. Followed by the four immeasurables: immeasurable, unbiased, goodwill or love, loving kindness. That's the first. Unbiased, immeasurable, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So these are the four immeasurables. In some traditions, these four are called the four divine dwellings, Brahma Viharas. And because of that name, it has given some the understanding that these four immeasurables are simply merely a way to get to the state of Buddha. And in the state of Buddha, these four immeasurables don't exist. But that is not how Kyoba Jigten Sumgen explains this. In fact, some would even say that even aspiration and application bodhicittas are simply merely a means to get to the state of Buddhahood. And at the state of Buddhahood, application and aspiration bodhicitta ends, finish, gone. This is also not how Kyoba Jigten Sumgen explains it. Kyoba Jigten Sumgen says that the aspiration and application bodhicitta, the four immeasurable minds, what happens is that, or rather, he says, what is Buddhahood? What is the state of Buddha? The state of Buddha is the state of the perfect embodiment of all these, the perfect embodiment of the four immeasurables, the perfect embodiment of aspiration and application bodhicitta. So here, I think this is a very meaningful point. It sounds like, if we don't understand, it sounds like, oh, this is just kind of, at best, you say, oh, this is just kind of different ways of saying the same thing. Or at worst, even some would say, oh, this is wrong view, because aspiration, application, bodhicitta, the four immeasurables, these are all matters of the path. When you arrive, the path is finished. Like they say, oh, these are all just finger pointing to the moon. Once you see the moon, you don't need the fingers. Some would say that. But this way of Kyoba Jigten Sumgen explaining it, that Buddhahood is the perfect embodiment of aspiration, application, bodhicitta, of the four immeasurable minds, of the conscientious application of adopting the 10 virtues, discarding the 10 non-virtues. He says all these things, they are what Buddhahood is. The Buddhahood is the perfect embodiment of all these things. So what I think for me, what he's saying is, he's offering us a way to relate to our current practice, not as desperate attempts, sometimes successful, sometimes not successful, to get somewhere else, but rather the moment, that moment where we refrain from causing harm, we refrain from lying. That moment is a Buddha moment. In that moment, right, we have embodied Buddhahood. So then our practice becomes much less dualistic, much less calculative, much less like, oh, I'm doing this here so that, in the future there, something good will happen, but rather to relate to like what we're practicing now, and to whatever degree that we're able to practice, what to adopt, what to discard. That itself is exactly what the Buddha state is. Of course, right now, our Buddha state, our experience of this Buddha state is unstable. On, off, on, off. Sometimes, when we look at it, we say mostly off, once in a while it's on, so to say. But this way of really relating to our practice makes it less dualistic.
Dhala Dhava Jebe Drano Par Jebe Ge Darba Dan Tam Je Gebe Bardu Chopra Jepa Tam Je Ge Se Jebe Ma Nam Ka Dan Nyam Pe Sen Jen Tam Je Dewa Pan Den Dung Yao Dan De Ne De La Na Me Pa Yang Dabra Zobe Chang Chu Ren Po Je Dobra Ja Nāma jebe dra nopar jebe ge karba dhan tam che gembe bardu jobra jeba tam jege se jebe ma nang kada nyambe senjen tam che dewa dan ten tu miao dan de le de la na me pa yang dabra zobe chanju rinpo je dobra ja Nova Jebe Nova Jebe Tarbadan Tam Je Gembe Bardu Jobra Jeba Tam Jege Ze Jebe Manang Kadang Nyampe Senjen Tam Je Dewa Tam Den Dumya Dan De Nerdu Lana Me Pa Yang Dabra Zobe Chanju Rinpo Je Tombar Ja de sama geki bardu longa yisum ge wala go ma je bardu longa yisum ge wala go du terene sonde ne ma san da sam ge bardu longa yisum ge wala go Sanje Chodan Soge Jonam La Janju Bardu Dane Gyabsurje Dage Jinsa Gibe Sonam Ke Drala Penjur Sanje Duprashu Sanje Chodan Soge Jonam La Janju Bardu Dane Gyabsurje Dage Jinsa Gibe Sonam Ke Drala Penjur Sanje Duprashu Sanje Jodan Zogi Jonam La Chanchu Bardu Dane Gyabse Che Dagi Jinse Gibe Sonam Ge Drola Penche Sanje Dubra Shu Kadan Yampe Senjen Tamje Dewa Dam Dewe Gyudan Dempra Gyuji Dunyao Dan Dunyao Ki Gyudan Dewa Gyuji Dunyao Mepe Dewa Dame Dewa Gyuji Nirin Chadan Nidan Dewe Tanyo La Nepra Gyuji Mona Kada Nyampe Senchen Tamje Dewa Dan Dewe Gyudan Dempra Gyuji Dunyao Dan Dunyao Gi Gyudan Dewa Gyuji Dunyao Mepe Dewa Dame Dewa Gyuji Nirin Chadan Nidan Dewe Tanyo La Nebra Gyuji Mona Kada Nyampe Senchen Tamje Dewa Dan Dewe Gyudan Dempra Gyuji Dunyao dang dunyao gi gyu dang dewa gyu ji. Dunyao me pe dewa dang me dewa gyu ji. Nirin cha dang ni dang dewe. Tanyo la nebra gyu ji.
Now the seven branch worship, the seven branch puja, which I will do in English, and then the different translation rooms can do in the different languages. In all the worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times. Before each of you, lions among humans, I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind. By the power of this aspiration to noble deeds,
All conquerors appear vividly in my mind, with as many bodies as there are atoms in all lands. I prostrate to all you conquerors. In each atom, a Buddha's numberless as atoms, all in the midst of the heirs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharma Dhatu as completely filled with you conquerors in this way, with infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse melodies. I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors and praise all of you gone to bliss. With the best flowers and best garlands, best music, ointments, and excellent parasols, finest lamps and superior incense I offer to you, conquerors. With excellent garments and best fragrances and sandalwood powder, heap high as Mount Meru, all wondrous offerings perfectly arranged I offer to you, conquerors. These vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you conquerors with the power of conviction in noble deeds, I prostrate and offer to all you conquerors. All the harmful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance. I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds of all conquerors in the 10 directions and the heirs of the Buddhas. Solitary realizers, hearers still in training and beyond, and all wandering beings. You who are lamps of the worlds of the 10 directions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi. All you who are my protectors, please turn the unexcelled wheel of Dharma. With palms together, I earnestly beseech you who may intend to manifest final nirvana. Please remain for as many eons as there are atoms in the world for the happiness and well-being of all wandering beings. Whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate to complete Bodhi. This ground sprinkled with scented waters and strewn with flowers, adorned with the supreme mountain, fog, continent, sun, and moon. I hold in mind as a Buddha land and offer it. May all wandering beings experience such a pure land. To the Gurus who possess the 3 kayas, I offer the outer, inner, secret, and thusness offerings. With my body, wealth, and all phenomenal existence, please grant the unsurpassed supreme attainment. Whatever slight virtue I may have gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate it all to complete Bodhi. Om Guru Deva Dakini Radna Mandala Pratija Soha. Durji Chanjan Delena Rodan, Manita Pupa Duji Tinko Kadun Sundin Zavela Mesha Sajula Mayidam Chokum So what there's a Daki Jinjiro Kia Begi Tome Samin Kedra Petun Sunum Lakia to make your body Jaham Baji Tenku Pushabadu. The Tadu Sangya Kilame Jinjilo Shitu Jinjin and Gaman Basan Again, Sento de Dobra Jinjiro. Yujin Johnson, Pemagis, Autumbola, Yasan Choking, Gondom, Pemagin, Sugar, Koto Kado, Mambo, Gagis, and Hard, Gagin Jello, Guru Pemazin, Joking Yaki, put on there, the Susan Jingo, Rasan Chokum, Tonze, but Zavela Mesha, so.
So just repeating the email that went out in terms of our schedule. So we will meet, well, obviously we're meeting right now, then we will meet another time on Saturday. And then next week, we won't be meeting because I'm traveling. Basically, I'm going back to Malaysia to see my parents after more than 2.5 years of not seeing them. So I'm going to leave next Monday, and then I think I get there on a Wednesday or something like that. Then there's like some quarantine, and I have no idea all the details of like the hotel and the internet. And so then the next Saturday, probably we are not going to meet, but we could meet. So stay tuned. Next Tuesday, definitely we will not be meeting. I'll be somewhere flying on the plane. Mm-hmm. So I just looked at the calendar. It looks like next Saturday, not this coming, next Saturday, we should be able to meet because I will still be locked up and no place to go. And so you're in luck. In fact, current rules say I have to quarantine in a hotel for 5 days. I could apply for quarantine at my parents' home, but that, I mean, rules aside, that sort of puts them at risk. Me flying for so many hours, going through airports, who knows what germs I pick up. So I've opted for the hotel quarantine. But so basically 5 days, I arrive on the 16th, 17, 18, 19. And so 19 is that Saturday. I should still be in the quarantine hotel. In fact, I joke with some people. I said maybe 17, 18, 19, I should do a program of 3 days of retreat and force other people to be in quarantine with me over Zoom. Since I probably will be jet lagged, and up at all different hours of the days and nights, we could do a 3-day continuous recitation of Om Mani Padme Hum. We'll call it the International Jet Lag Drupchen. Drupchen is where these big, retreats where people stay up all night and all day reciting mantras. We'll call it the first International Jet Lag Drupchen. Anyway, when I'm over in Malaysia, in that part of the world, classes will continue once, we, will announce, because, it's the same, just like we have friends now in Malaysia and Singapore, that part of the world, participating in these classes, so there's no reason why I can't continue. So stay tuned for the schedule announcement soon. So chapter 9, the chapter on wisdom, as I've said, it is the most challenging chapter of the entire text. And also, even Shantideva declares, at the beginning of this chapter, he says, everything else was taught for the purpose of this topic of wisdom. But this is not an easy chapter. It's a difficult chapter. It's difficult for me. And the truth is, many of the stanzas here, you read it and you say, oh, okay. And then you read the commentaries. And, I read the commentaries. I have read maybe both traditional commentaries and modern commentaries, maybe 5 or 6 different commentaries. So I understand on the surface level what they are saying, but it's still really challenging. Then it's even harder, I think, to try to communicate to all of you what each of these stanzas are referring to. Sometimes it's not even clear. Is Shantideva talking about a mistaken view, or is he talking about the view that he is forwarding? But please do not be discouraged by how challenging this chapter is, and think, oh my gosh, no way, I would get any understanding of this wisdom business. And if, indeed everything else is taught for the sake of this wisdom, and this wisdom is so difficult to understand, then it's hopeless for me. Don't think of it that way. Because what is actually challenging about specifically this chapter, not about the topic of wisdom, but specifically what is challenging about this chapter is that Shantideva is conveying the wisdom right? He's conveying the wisdom teachings by using vocabulary and reference points that his colleagues at Nalanda knew by heart and knew very clearly. But that is not our context, you see. So that's why this is so challenging. If it seems to us that it's very confusing, is he talking about a view that he's criticizing, or is he forwarding his understanding? It's unclear to us, but it wasn't unclear to his audience, because they were all so expert, so schooled in what he's talking about. So he only needs to use a particular word, a particular expression. Immediately his audience then, right, when this was first taught, knew what he was talking about. Yeah. So if it is challenging, it's simply challenging because we don't have the same background as his audience to digest this material. So as for the wisdom itself, is it necessary to know all this vocabulary, all these different systems, this and that? I would say no, because there are so many ways to access that wisdom. So for example, Milarepa, I don't think he ever studied all these different schools of thought, what Hindus say, what a particular type of Hindu says, what a particular type of Buddhist says, which is what Shantideva is addressing. Because again, he is among the most educated people in India at that time. So he's engaging them. So he's using what they know in order to point to them what this wisdom is. So then for someone like Milarepa, this greatest kind of Tibetan master, well known in all lineages, even though we say he was Gagyupa, but basically, he inspired everyone, right? He never had to study. He never spent time studying all the different philosophical systems, in India, both Buddhists, non-Buddhists, and how it's right or how it's wrong, which aspect of what they say, is still needs to be further explained. He never studied any of that. But through the instructions from his guru about the nature of phenomena, about the nature of mind, he achieved the wisdom in which all the other practices were taught, were given for the purpose of. So I think it's fair to say, like, you know, in the development of Buddhism in India, Buddhism reached a certain sophistication, a certain height of development. 1,000 years after the Buddha, 1,500 years after the Buddha, the great empire, kings, emperors of India, many of them also became Buddhist. So like an institution like Nalanda was not just a monastery. In fact, it was a big university teaching all kinds of subjects, secular subjects, spiritual subjects, integrated. So when Buddhism reached such a height, you know, Buddhism in terms of like the religion Buddhism is the interaction between the Buddha Dharma and culture, right? And culture and human culture. So that's how we get Buddhism. So when Buddhism developed into such heights in Indian civilization, sometimes things got lost, you know. The essence, the Buddha Dharma, you know, got lost. So also, you know, we got to be careful so that we don't, you know, get lost as well in the complexities of how Buddhism has evolved. This is not a criticism of how Buddhism has evolved necessarily. If the Buddha Dharma is to catch anyone's attention, it has to be able to be communicated in the most developed, sophisticated language and ideas. Like now in the West and even in Asia, very trendy to connect Buddhism with modern science. Oh, this scientific study says this. Oh, the scientists are meeting with the Dalai Lama. Scientists is meeting with, you know, and putting all these things in the heads of meditators and measuring all this. Yeah, so all this, you know, necessarily, right? If you want more people to pay attention to the Buddha Dharma, then Buddhism needs to keep upgrading itself. But we take refuge first and foremost in Buddha Dharma, not Buddhism. So anyway, all of this talk, of course, is my way of delaying talking about the difficult things. Now, no choice. So in stanza 11, around there, right? In fact, starting from stanza 9 to 12, Shantideva is addressing this objection. And this objection is centered around an example that the Buddha uses a lot, which is the telling us to, Buddha teaching us that all our experiences, everything that we think to be real, to be meaningful, to be terrible, to be good, all of it, it is like an illusion. So this is the middle way, part of the middle way teachings, that it is all like an illusion. So here Shantideva raises a hypothetical objection, which is, well, if everything is like an illusion, then why bother? What's the point? Why work so hard to become a Buddha? It's just an illusion, what's the big deal? Or why be afraid of killing? Since, since you say, everything is like an illusion, there's nothing that bad about killing. So stanza 9, Shantideva poses a question on behalf of those who criticize this idea. And you say everything is like illusion. So stanza 9, Shantideva raises this question that basically the question is saying, if everything is illusion, then Buddhahood is pointless. Or rather, stanza 9 is saying, if everything is illusion, then the idea of great merit being accumulated when you make offerings to Buddhas, that goes out the window. And then secondly, if you say that this is all just illusion, then this business about rebirth, about more lifetimes, many lifetimes, that's also goes out the window. He says this. And so this is a very serious question that he raises, because, and maybe not serious among people who don't believe in the Buddha Dharma, secular, but among people who believe in the Buddha Dharma, raising this question in stanza 9 is basically saying, your teaching about everything is like an illusion has undermined two very important things that we Buddhists are focused on, which is the accumulation of merit and the consequence of karma, of cause and effect. So Shantideva is voicing an objection that says that your teachings about illusion, illusory nature of things, is undermining the very foundations of our spiritual tradition. In stanza 10, he does not directly answer this objection. He does not directly answer, but he provides an answer, which is, he says, as long as the conditions for the illusion exist, then what is produced within that illusion continues to have significance, and that we have to deal with that. So he says, no matter how long, if you think that, oh, if the illusion is only for a few moments, then it doesn't matter. If the illusion is very long, now it matters. He says, no, no, no. Regardless of whether the illusion is short or long, it does matter as long as the conditions that produce this illusory like reality, you cannot ignore that reality. To me, what it's saying is something along these lines, I would say. Even though we know, our experiences of happiness and suffering is really very fleeting, right? It's actually, maybe before you study the Buddha Dharma, you think, happiness and suffering is so real, right? But at this point, most of you have studied enough Buddha Dharma, has been exposed enough to the Buddha Dharma, then it's very fleeting, happiness and suffering. But nonetheless, when happiness turns up, it's kind of nice. When suffering turns up, it's not enough to just say, oh, this is not really real. You might intellectually say, oh, this is not really real, but the heart is heavy. The heart carries a heavy load. So Shantideva is saying, this heavy load that the heart carries still needs to be unburdened. Uh, 11 and 12, he's going to say a little bit about, the differences between two types of illusion. The illusion that is like literally like the illusion that a magician produces, and the illusion that Buddha says our life, our existence, and our experiences are. And he says there is a crucial difference between these two types of illusions. So here we see, like Shantideva clarifying, just because the Buddha uses the idea or uses the example of illusion to help us understand the nature of our minds, of our lives, of our reality, be careful not to over apply this concept of illusion. So in fact, the key is here. Almost always, although not, I can say not 100%, but almost always, Buddhist texts always say, like an illusion. Compares things to like an illusion, meaning it has the qualities of an illusion, but it is not literally an illusion. That's the crucial line. That's the crucial difference. Okay, now let's take a short break before we go into 11 and 12.
Om Wage Jware Mum. Om Wage Jware Mum. Om Wage Jware Mum. 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 Wage Jware Mum. Om
Okay, so verse 11 and 12. Yeah, they're shifting right from saying, "Hey, if you say everything is illusion, then no point making offerings to Buddhas to accumulate merit. No point worrying about thinking about karmic effects that go beyond one lifetime." All that sort of all that sort of objections, right? 11 and 12 is is another objection raised, which is so if you say that everything is illusory, like then just as there's nothing wrong to kill a person that a magician has produced, therefore there is also no issue, no problem with killing your neighbor because since, you know, your neighbor is an illusion, so what's the problem? So basically 11 and 12 is raising that objection, or raising that obviously ridiculous conclusion, to try to force Shantideva to say, oh, yes, it's not an illusion. But of course, Shantideva's answer is not that it is not an illusion, but again, there are two types of illusion. When Buddha says that all of this is like an illusion, he is saying only certain aspects of illusion. And we should not overextend that notion. In fact, if the line, the third and the fourth line of verse 12, and the first two lines of verse 13, essentially says this. He says, illusions, in the translation that I have, I'm going to read from there. It says, so in line 3 and 4 of verse 12, it says, illusions spring from various causes. Therefore, illusions are of different kinds. So there are different kinds of illusions here. He says, don't get them confused. And then first two lines of 13, it says, a single cause for everything there never was. I believe these two lines should go with the topic that is, with the reasoning that comes from the previous two verses. In the commentaries, most of them do something else with these first two lines. They take this opportunity to talk about, oh, you know, this is answering some Indian beliefs that this world came about because a single cause, meaning like a God created all of this. But it doesn't flow with with what's going on here. You know, it's like, well, that's kind of random. You know, why suddenly verse 13 talks about, well, you know, there is, you know, this world did not come into existence due to one cause, meaning a God created everything. Here, I really think that these first two lines of 13 continues from the last two lines of 12, which is basically Shantideva says, different types of illusions come about due to different reasons. The kind of illusion that a magician creates, or specifically the kind of illusory beings that a magician creates. Those beings don't have this quality of mind. In other words, they don't have autonomy. They cannot act based on their own volition. They don't have this thing called mind. Today, I think this debate or this idea can be carried to I think AI, artificial intelligence, you know. At least up until now, artificial intelligence don't have sentience yet. Well, yet, who knows what will happen in the future. That means they don't have their own volition. They are not independent beings in that sense. So Shantideva says, that's one kind of illusion created through a particular set of causes. With regards to those illusions, yes, of course, you know, no problem. Because no beings are killed, even if you kill those that are produced by a magician. But the beings that arise, like you and me, not through the workings of a magician, but through our causes and conditions, our karmic package, so to say. These beings fundamentally have mind, have volition. And when beings with volition are killed, when you kill a being that has volition, that has mind, then there is karmic effect. And that's the difference, is Shantideva's answer. So I sometimes have said, I think some of you have heard me talk about this. So this example of, or to say that, we exist in an illusory-like manner, illusory-like quality to our existence. Yeah, we should update this example, this analogy, too, because illusory sometimes seems very mystical, very magical. Then we kind of get carried away, right, by this word. So what can we update this to? We can say movie-like, like a movie. We should relate to, we should understand that our reality is like a movie. So you should not confuse, between, like, say, characters in movies, right? They are born, they die, and all kinds of things happen to them, right? So yes, the Buddha does say, now, understanding that, using that as an example, see how, in fact, even our reality is like that. But don't confuse the two, they're not exactly the same. These are two types of movie. In the second half of verse 13, so let me read the second half of verse 13 and the first two lines of verse 14. If ultimately beings are in nirvana, you will say, but relatively circle in samsara, if you say that, then even Buddhahood would revert to the samsaric state. So why? Why pursue the Bodhisattva path? So now is raising a different objection by a different group. In the commentaries, they tell us this is raised by some within the Buddhist family who insist that samsara and nirvana are two completely different realities, and nirvana is ultimately true, and samsara, by definition, because nirvana is ultimately true, then samsara is also true. So you have to truly get rid of samsara and truly arrive at nirvana. So this may, correspond to a particular group of Buddhists in ancient India. And often again in the commentaries, they say, oh, these are the Vaibhashikas. But for us, these terms may be not so important. Also, I think sometimes if we say, oh, this is Vaibhashika, and this is Chittamatra, or this is this school, we can easily kind of slip into kind of sectarian mind, like, oh, this school is so wrong and our school is so right and this and that. So rather than doing that, we should see how this is referring to certain kind of misunderstandings that might arise in our practice that leads us to think, oh, nirvana is definitely real, truly there, and samsara is real and truly here, and I need to get from here to there, and these are two complete different realities. So Shantideva says, no, this is not how we look at things. How we look at things is this. From the ultimate point of view, beings are already in this state of nirvana, free from confusion. But on the relative level right now, beings are circling in this cycle of confusion called samsara. And the difference between beings and Buddhas are, Buddhas were once like beings. How? Ultimately, they were in the state of nirvana, but relatively, they were in a state of wandering in confusion in samsara. And when they woke up from that wandering, then they left behind that confused wandering. Buddhas. What are Buddhas? Buddhas are also beings like you and I now, wandering in a state of confusion. But when that confusion is completely dispelled, done with, then we call them Buddhas. But on the ultimate level, whether Buddhas or beings, awakened Buddhas or confused beings, on the ultimate level, the mind, the nature of mind is already in a state of freedom from confusion because of emptiness. But on the relative level, samsaric experiences are still arising.
Sorry, Dr. Lai, can you repeat the last part? On relative level, being circulating in samsara, that whole chunk.
So on the relative level, beings are still circulating in the confusion of samsara. For Buddhas, why they are Buddhas is because on the relative level, they no longer circle in confusion. That's the only real difference, according to the middle way. According to Shantideva's explanation. It's not that on the ultimate level, beings and Buddhas are distinguished. On the ultimate level, beings and Buddhas, no difference. In fact, you could say on the ultimate level, we are all Buddhas. What changes is, in fact, on the relative level. The transition from a confused being to an awakened Buddha is something that pertains to the relative level. Yeah, make sense? Yes, there's a question.
Is it not correct to say that change can only happen on the relative level? That ultimately there's nothing to change, but also
Yeah, sure.
the relative level is the only one we have access to.
Yes,
So that's where we have to change.
yes. Correct, yes.
Thank
Something turned up on the chat. I think I caught a glimpse that says, so karma is relative truth? Yes, karma is relative truth. But relative, in middle way teachings, relative doesn't mean not important. As Judy's question just highlighted for us, in fact, in a way, we are saying, all the change that we're talking about, why we can change from suffering to happiness, is a matter of the relative. So then we have to pay very careful attention to the relative. This is also why, Shantideva says, later he says, the ultimate, like the ultimate, right, cannot be reached by a conditioned mind. So he says, don't even try, There are some Buddhists, who go on and on about the ultimate. And all they're saying is basically the ultimate, cannot. It's beyond everything. So some Buddhists have the habit of like always talking about, oh, the ultimate is beyond, but spend so much time talking about ultimate, and then on the relative level where happiness and suffering is taking place, no idea what to do with it. There's another question I saw that says, so what about Buddha nature? We are told that we all have Buddha nature. Is that relative? Yes, of course, that's relative insofar as those are concepts, but they are useful concepts. Again, please remember very carefully, insofar as the middle way explanation goes, which is the main way. We in Tibetan Buddhism, it said that the middle way The middle way understanding is the closest to the reality of things. So in the middle way explanation, relative doesn't mean unimportant and insignificant. Relative is a technical word. It means this is the realm of subject and object. And in the realm of subject and object is primarily, it's about the only place that happiness and suffering can even be entertained. So at the end of the day, it's this relative reality that the Buddha has taught us what to do with. It's not that which is beyond happiness and suffering that the Buddha is busy teaching us about. That doesn't need to be taught because that already is. Yeah, so to elaborate a little, so according to the middle way understanding, already right now, things are by nature empty of an inherent existence. Things, our minds, are empty of inherent existence. So there's nothing you need to do or can do to improve this empty of inherent existence. All things, all minds are already empty of inherent existence. This is just the way things are. So there's nothing to do there. So that's what we call the ultimate. There's nothing to do there on the ultimate side of things. There's nothing to do there. You cannot improve it, and you cannot make it worse because its nature is already free from any inherent existence, therefore free from any fixation, therefore free from any grasping, any possibility of any true grasping going on. That is already the way things are. What needs to be done is the misunderstanding or the lack of, well, starting with the lack of understanding of this and the misunderstanding that arises from this lack of understanding that on the ultimate level, things are already like this. So what needs to be removed are all the misunderstandings, all the hang-ups, all the wrong views, all the crazy responses that arise in relation to not understanding this point. That's what needs to be removed. And that's a matter of the relative level. So the Buddha gave some analogies, some examples. He said, it's like, when you suffer from a certain kind of eye disease, like a cataract or something like that, then you will see like things, floating in the space, sometimes called flowers. Poetically, it's called flowers in space. So you see like these flowers floating around in space. But the reality is like there's no flowers floating around in space. It is only because of a defect with your eye that causes you to see flowers floating in space. So when you remove that eye defect, that illness, right? Did the flowers go somewhere? No. Did the flowers in that moment disappear somewhere in some point in space? No. Did someone come and take away the flowers? No. Because in the first place, these imaginary flowers, or these flowers that arose due to a defect with the eye, they were never there in the first place. So there's a very helpful comment by Victoria in the chat, so you all can read that. And that's exactly what the middle way view will say. And to add to that, I will say, and because therefore the problem is on the relative level, so everything the Buddha gave, all the teachings, from the Four Noble Truths all the way to, our nature is Buddha, all those things are given to overcome the unawakened perception. So coming back to our text, so some will say, if you say that ultimately all beings are already in the state of Buddha, only on the relative level they are confused and wondering. Then, when someone becomes a Buddha, and if the state of Buddha and not Buddha is fundamentally the same, won't we have a problem of Buddhas at some other future point becoming not Buddhas again? In other words, these are those who are not comfortable with the idea that between Buddha and not Buddha is such a fine line in a way. They want to say, no, it's absolutely different. One is over there and one is over here. They are very concerned, that you don't confuse the two. And in a way, this point, even the opponent's point, so to say, has some value for us. Because some of us might get too carried away by samsara and nirvana is one. I see that, some of us think that we have such a high view. All samsara and nirvana is on the ultimate level the same. Then some of us make that mistake of saying, oh, ultimately they are the same. Oh, then we go continue our confusions in samsara, create a whole bunch of mess. Then we say, oh, it's all the same. Then that is wrong view, wrong approach. So in a way, like we can appreciate this objection by seeing that maybe we should start by saying, oh, yes, confused existence is here, freedom from confusion is over there. We need to make very clear the difference. But the middle way will say, if we understand it in terms of relative and ultimate, then that takes us closer to the reality of things.
Sorry. Middle way say if.
Middle way says, the middle way position says, yes, there is a difference between confused existence and awakened existence, of course. But the difference is not that ultimately they are two separate realities. The difference is, on the ultimate level, nothing changes, nothing is improved. On the relative level is where the transformation needs to happen. Yeah, so the line 3 and 4 in verse 14 and line 1 and 2 in 15. Shantideva says, as long as on the relative level, all these confusions continue to produce these illusorily arising experiences of good and bad, happiness and suffering, then samsara continues. But if we cut this stream, if we stop this stream, then all the confusions of the relative level, all this confusion, confused perception, self, other, ultimate, relative, then they all will be dispelled once and for all. So there is, to say that Buddhas and sentient beings have the same nature does not mean that, it does mean, when we say Buddhas and sentient beings have the same nature, it does mean that sentient beings can get rid of confusion completely and achieve the Buddha state. But it does not mean that the Buddha state will at some future point accidentally turn back into the confused state. So here today we're going to end here because in the rest of verse 15, like verse 3 and 4, right? Shantideva switches to another objection mid-verse. Yeah. So again, therefore, if you find this challenging, well, it's simply because we were not there. So we don't understand, much of why he's switching like this. As I said, you try to imagine being there the first time he taught this. So he's looking at this side, one group of monks, he knows them, right? And he says, I know what you're thinking, you believe that samsara and nirvana are completely two different realities. Let me address that. Then you can almost kind of try to imagine over here, there's another group of monks raising their hands, wanting to object, and then he turns and he says, I know what you want to say, which is now he switches to those who say that everything is just the mind. Everything is just the mind. Everything that we experience is necessarily experienced by the mind. And what is being experienced is also a product of the mind. And therefore, the mind is real. This last group wants to say, everything about samsara is not real, and therefore only nirvana is real. Shantideva says, no. Too blunt, too imprecise. The next group wants to say, yes, everything is mind. Oh, yes, yes, we agree with you. And everything that we experience is a product of mind. Yes, 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 we agree with you. But surely then mind must be what's real. Shantideva is going to say, Basically, in this section, what keeps coming up is some group wanting to say, so this must be truly real, and it can stand by itself. This must be what's real then. Shantideva is going to say, no, 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 no. Why? Because whatever we assert to be real in the sense of like it can stand up by itself without contributing conditions, that is wrong view. In other words, everything is dependently arising, which is the other side of saying everything is empty. This is the middle way. Yeah, so it's helpful for us to have this kind of overview understanding that fundamentally what the middle way understanding is, everything exists, arises, exists, continue to exist and disappear due to an intricate network of causes and conditions. And this is just another way of saying, it's illusory nature. They're saying the same thing. which also means that whoever or whatever view that wants to say, oh, this is real, meaning this can stand by itself without interdependence. So the first group that Shantideva refutes is basically those who think all of this that I experience here, they are real. As in they can stand by themselves, in and of themselves, without causes and conditions. He refutes that. Then a more sophisticated view, oh, all of this is not real. Surely nirvana that the Buddha tells us we should arrive at, we should reach, is real. Surely nirvana must be real. Shantideva refutes that. Now, on Saturday, we will see another position, more sophisticated, but still this habit, right? This desire to keep slipping in that something, there must be something, that can stand on its own 2 feet or 1 feet, so to say, single cause, right? It must be real. The third group is those who say mind must be real. Shantideva says no. Mind must be that one thing that stands on itself, doesn't need anything else to exist in and of itself. Shantideva says no, it cannot be. And so this whole section, the rest of the wisdom chapter is not always about refuting. There is like the 4 foundations of mindfulness is actually taught further down this chapter. Just at the beginning of the chapter, he is saying no, 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 no. So this is the sword of Manjushri, slashing away. So that every last attempt that we might have to assert our habit of wanting some certainty, some definite standing on itself truth. In other words, whatever our grasping will create so that grasping can continue, Shantideva will destroy. Manjushri will destroy. The Buddha will destroy, because it's destroying, in any case, that which does not exist. Does not truly exist, but exists relatively to create all of this confusion and mess. So this sword of Manjushri, so to say, this wisdom sword, this topic of chapter 9. Again, because of who Shantideva is talking to, so then he has to use, those vocabulary, those systems that the Nalanda monks are familiar with. In a comparable situation, like many stories of the Zen or the Chan tradition in East Asia, some of you might have heard of these things called Gong'an or koans. So in a typical koan or Gong'an, sometimes we translate that as a riddle, something like Buddha nature, things like that, right? So in those stories, you always see, the master asked the disciple that, then the disciple has to give an answer. Does the dog have Buddha nature? So then, does the dog have Buddha nature? No. Actually, the whole koan is, does the dog have Buddha nature? No. And then the disciple has to figure that out. What does it mean? What does this mean? Does the dog have Buddha nature? No. Now, of course, ordinary Buddhist teachings, yes, of course, a dog has Buddha nature, but why this peculiar answer? Does a dog have Buddha nature? No. So the student will come back after meditating on this and try to give an explanation. And the master will basically cut whatever explanation that the student come up with his mind. The master will say, no, go back and keep meditating on this. Then they'll come back with another set of answers. No, another set of answers. No, 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 no. This is the process of exhausting all our ways and means to grasp at something. That is another method to cut through to the wisdom. So we will stop here today with the dedication, and then we continue on Saturday. Chanchu semcho rinpoche ma ge banam ge gyuche ge ba nyam ba me ba ya one gong du be war shu. Okay, ta-ta.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Gracias.
Gracias. Gracias.
Gracias, Dr. Lee.
Gracias.
Gracias. Nos vemos pronto.
Thank you to all.